The broadcast of the regular meeting of the Minneapolis Business Inspections and Zoning Committee will now begin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Business Inspections and Zoning Committee for today, which is May 19th. I'm Lisa Goodman and I am chairing today's meeting. As we begin, I'll note for the record that this is a meeting that has remote participation from members of the City Council as well as city staff as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 as a result of the local public health emergency. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify a quorum for this meeting.
Councilmember Schrader?
Here.
Reich?
Here.
Gordon?
Here.
Fletcher?
Here.
Ellison? Councilmember Ellison? Chair Goodman?
Present.
There are 5 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. The agenda for today's meeting is before us. I'll begin with the consent agenda, which includes items 4 through 6 on the agenda. Item number 4 are liquor license approvals. Item 5 is a historic landmark designation of the Joyce Memorial Methodist Church. Item 6 is setting a public hearing for June 2nd with regard to adding provisions to the Housing Maintenance Code related to tenant relocation assistance to tenants who have moved following a revocation or cancellation of a rental license. Are there any items anyone would like to pull off of the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll move to approve the consent agenda and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader?
Aye.
Reich?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye.
Fletcher? Councilmember Fletcher?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Chair Goodman?
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
That carries and the consent agenda is approved. We'll next move on to the quasi-judicial hearing portion of our agenda. Considering that items 1 through 3 all have the same appellant, I'm going to suggest we handle the hearings jointly. They are the consideration of appeals submitted by Garrett Duncan regarding the Heritage Preservation Commission's decision to deny the demolition of a historic resource. And the applications are for properties located at 406 11th Avenue Southeast, 410 11th Avenue Southeast, 1103 4th Street Southeast. We'll begin with the staff presentation on these items.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Rob Sklecki. I'm a city planner in the Historic Preservation section of CPED. Today I'm presenting appeal application submitted by Garrett Duncan, who is the applicant and the appellant of the April 21st, 2020 Heritage Preservation Commission's denial of 3 demolition of historic resource applications for neighboring properties in the Marcy Homes neighborhood. The properties are located at 406 11th Avenue Southeast, 410 11th Avenue Southeast, and 1103 4th Street Southeast. Next slide, please. The dwellings were constructed in 1901 and were built in the Queen Anne, Shingle, and Colonial Revival styles. The properties were designed by William Kenyon and built by Edward James Davis for Mary Loughran, who was the owner. The city of Minneapolis considers William Kenyon to be a master architect. He was well known for designing dwellings based in revival styles of the era. Minneapolis city directories confirm that the 3 dwellings began as single-family rental homes and quickly became multifamily residences. During the early 1900s, the properties were home to multiple fraternities and sororities at different times, as well as workers and many other students throughout their existence. The 3 properties have served as affordable, high-density student rooming homes for over a century. Next slide, please. The applicant has proposed to demolish the 3 subject buildings and construct a 65-unit apartment building on the corner land. On April 21st, 2020, the Minneapolis HPC heard the demolition of historic resource applications for the subject properties. Notwithstanding staff recommendations, the commission voted to deny the individual applications, establish interim protection, and direct staff to prepare or cause to be prepared a designation study for a potential historic district to include the properties at 406 11th Avenue The Heritage Preservation Commission, their motion was made based on the following findings. There are reasonable alternatives to demolition. Demolition is not required to correct an unsafe condition. The exterior integrity of the properties is decent. And the 3 buildings could merit designation as non-high style residences designed by William Kenyon as spec properties that serve the Dinkytown neighborhood as student housing for over a century. And with that, I am available for any questions relating to these applications and the HPC's decisions. Otherwise, I understand the applicant or the appellant is here as well, and will make a presentation as scheduled. But thank you.
Thank you very much for your report, Rob. We'll then go ahead and see if anyone has any questions for staff on his presentation. Members of the committee can either type into the meeting chat that you have a question or just turn your mic on. That's all good. Are there any questions for staff? Okay, then I'm going to proceed to open the public hearing on items number 1 through 3. With this type of hearing, we give the appellant an opportunity to make their case first. Is Garrett Duncan on the line to speak to these items? Mr. Duncan, you might have to unmute your mic, sir.
Hello, Councilmember Goodman. North Bay.
So 2 people are talking at the same time. Mr. Duncan, are you on the line?
Chair Goodman, I believe Mr. Duncan is not on the line, but his representative, Carol Lansing, Amy Lucas, and or Scott Nelson are in queue.
So Mr. Duncan is not here to speak to this issue himself at all.
Correct.
Councilmember Goodman?
Yeah, that must be Carol. I can only go by the people I know. Yes?
Yes. Councilmember Goodman, Garrett works for North Bay and Daniel Oberpriller, and he did the paperwork for us. For our presentation, we're asking Amy Lucas to address the historic issues first. Daniel Oberpriller will address the economic and renovation cost issues, and then I'll do a short conclusion.
Okay, I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes for your entire presentation, so divide it accordingly, and we'll ask Ms. Lucas to begin.
Amy Lucas, press *6 to unmute.
So perhaps Ms. Lucas is still muted.
I think I am no longer muted. This is Amy
Perfect.
Lucas.
Thank you, Amy.
Yay. So I'm Amy Lucas, a historic consultant with landscape research, and I did provide the lengthy evaluation of these 3 properties for the HPC application. This area has been surveyed multiple times through the years. The St. Anthony Falls Historic District, 6th Street Historic District, and the U of M Greek Letter Chapter House Historic District came out of many of these surveys in this area. In 2003, my business partner Carol Zelli surveyed the area and recommended the Frat Road District, which was designated, as well as 10 other homes for individual study in this area. These 3 homes were not recommended in that survey. In 2011, Mead and Hunt also surveyed the area and did not recommend these 3 homes for further study. To be listed, a building must meet the criteria for local designation and retain integrity. My evaluation indicated that there are multiple Kenyon houses in Minneapolis. There are multiple examples, many of them designated, of these architectural styles in Minneapolis, and there are better examples with less deterioration and higher integrity. The staff report also did not recommend further research or designation of these 3 buildings. But at the HPC hearing, the HPC recommended a mini district of these 3 houses. And as Rob explained, one, that the exterior integrity of these properties was considered decent, And the buildings could merit designation as non-high-style residences designed by Kenyon as a spec property that served Dinkytown as student housing for over a century. So I'm going to tackle these three items. The first is the architect of these houses, Kenyon, was prolific. In fact, there are 3 other Kenyon houses in the Mercy Homes neighborhood. One is next door to these 3 properties, and 2 are around the corner. If Kenyon's repertoire in this area is so significant, I believe the HPC should have looked at all of Kenyon's works, especially the 4th one next door. It's difficult to make significance claims if you're not looking at the breadth of an architect's work. And my report recommended the city conduct a survey of Kenyon's works in order to understand his career. Kenyon's 2 personal homes actually remain in Minneapolis with excellent integrity. Generally, architects' personal homes tend to be the purest examples of their architectural style. And my report also noted that Kenyon designed a contiguous group of 8 houses in Lowry Hill, also spec houses. These houses retain high integrity, unlike the 3 houses in Marcy Homes, which are severely deteriorated. At the hearing, one HPC commissioner noted that these 3 houses in Marcy Homes reflected a middle class, while the Lowry Hill houses reflected the upper class, and this is inaccurate. When these 3 houses were built in Mercy Homes, the 2 neighborhoods represented were very similar in economic class. Governor John Pillsbury lived around the corner. It's the institutional creep of the U of M and the 35W construction that has since altered the economics of Mercy Homes neighborhood. The second claim of the HPC is that they may be significant as spec housing or as student housing. These 3 houses were built as single-family homes. They had 1 kitchen. The rental history is in the report. One was rented to a minister and his family, another to an attorney and his family. They eventually were occupied as rooming houses, and I went through years of city directories. I didn't include all the residents because this type of housing is typical throughout Minneapolis. But the roomers were not just students. The report notes that they were traveling salesmen, clerks, coopers, railroad agents. Remember, these houses are very close to the St. Anthony Falls industry also. And while frats and sororities moved in and out of these houses, they ended up leaving and building their own houses, which are designated. But I never found these houses to be consistently student housing only. And even today, they are not fully occupied by students. Furthermore, most of Minneapolis was developed by spec builders at the turn of the century. We have a long history of absentee landlords. And I just completed a report on Groveland Terrace and Mount Curve, where one owner built the majority of the mansions and rented them for many years. It's a long history of a transient community here. The third claim at the hearing is the commissioner noted that these houses may be significant because they were developed by a woman. And in my report, I did note that Mary Loughran's name is listed on the building permits and the title, but I can't speak to her actual involvement in the development of these houses. At that time, men commonly hid their assets in their wives' names. Remember, women couldn't even vote at the time. And I can't prove or disprove her husband, William Loughran's involvement in the financing of these houses. And you'll never be able to prove it. It's not written. You don't have her diaries. It's not in newspapers. It's conjecture. So these are the 3 points the HPC commissioners brought up at the hearing. The HPC did not make findings that these 3 houses met one of the criteria for local designation. Instead, they asked for more research. More research should involve all of Kenyon's career. You cannot evaluate these 3 houses alone, and I highly doubt that further research will alter the conclusions that I found in the evaluation. I'm available for further questions, but I was going to turn it over to Dan Oberpiller, the developer from North Bay, to discuss the economic feasibility of reusing these houses.
Okay, Mr. Oberpiller, there's not a ton of time, so if you could be brief, that'd be great.
Press *6 to unmute.
Hi, Daniel Oberpriller from North Bay Companies here. I'm going to talk about the condition of the buildings and the cost of rehab and their economic usefulness. Currently, the use is a 12-room rooming house, basically broad stroking across the portfolio. There is a 4-unit building that has been rehabbed on the corner. Before North Bay bought the properties, they're under the same management company for years. They look okay from the outside because they were just repainted, but the interiors are in rough shape, and not really compliant. Although there's a significant amount of work is done annually to maintain the buildings on minimum levels, the continued use, a complete renovation is necessary to bring them to current fire code and housing code levels. They were built as single-family houses, but been chopped up inside as rooming houses. The corner building on the frontage of 4th Street is a 4-unit, 10-bedroom apartment building. All the rooms in the rooming houses are single kitchen and laundry. Each bathroom is shared by 4 or 5 roomers, and rooming houses are not safe housing options during the pandemic. The work to renovate the buildings would also trigger accessibility compliance, require accessible units. The bathroom on the 1st floor, which is not there currently in any of the buildings. The buildings are very inefficient from an energy perspective. They're very costly to heat, poor insulation, lap siding, deteriorated exteriors, and then modified many times. Adding insulation and windows and providing new energy efficient furnaces and heating systems would be required soon if the current use was to be continued, and the cost of rehab ranges basically from $573,000 to $626,000 each building. At that point, the rooming units would not be affordable or marketable when the renovation costs are factored into the rent plus the land costs. The monthly rent right now for the rooming unit is $375 to $450, but it need to be $750, $750 to $850, and not include the utilities to make it work for after renovation. The average monthly, so then it makes no economic sense basically to invest that much money in a renovation, be able to charge the rents, because there wouldn't be a clientele that would probably do that. We just bought the properties with the intention of redeveloping that way, and what we're going to propose is consistent with the city land use plans. The 2040 plan guides the site is community mixed use, which calls for a larger scale mixed use development. The 2040 plan built form guidance is Corridor 6. The redevelopment is consistent with 2014 Marcy Homes master plan. Encourages developers to aggregate lots for more dense development on the corridor streets and adjacent from properties and replace properties that are beyond repair. The proposed 6-story, 65 unit mixed use building would be consistent with that land use package. The new building would be energy efficient, transit oriented, code compliant. It'd have individual bathrooms and kitchens. Much greater economic value. It would generate current tax value for the 3 parcels is $26,000, and the current the assessed tax value upon completion would be about $250,000, allocating about $3,600 a unit in taxable assessment. And then I can pass this to Carol for the wrap up.
Ms. Lansing, welcome.
Carol Lansing, press *6 to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The decision before you, I wanted to point out, because of some of the discussion around this, is not about preservation of affordable housing. Affordability is not relevant to whether the properties are historically significant, and this is also not housing in a condition that should be preserved, and it won't remain affordable if it were renovated, as it would need to be to continue to operate. Your decision is about whether the houses are historically significant. Staff concluded they weren't. Amy Lucas refuted the bases that the HPC relied on for directing further study. Another factor for you to consider is whether these are properties that you want to devote city funds and staff time into studying further. They're far from away from the staff's work plan for work they should be doing or would like to be doing on HPC studies. And then finally, even if there is potential historic significance, is there a reasonable alternative to demolition? And relevant to that determination is how you weigh the economic value and usefulness of housing in poor condition against the more number of units, new, safer, and healthier housing that will be created, and against redevelopment that is both consistent with city plans and will contribute significantly more to the city's tax base. So we believe all these factors weigh in support of approving the demolition applications and urge the council to grant the appeals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lansing. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue?
Chair Goodman, there are 2 other speakers online.
Okay, so we'll ask Barbara Cam to speak first, and if you could keep your comments to 2 minutes, that would be great. Ms. Cam, press *6 to be unmuted.
My name is Barbara Cam. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I live at 423 7th Street Southeast, and I'm on the Marcy Homes Neighborhood Association Board. We should have our HPC letter and the one sent today. The architect's body of work should be considered as a continuum, preserving the history of that work. These 3 houses represent unique turn-of-the-century styles and a different economic class from the landmark Kenyon houses in Lowry Hill. This time, with criteria specific to the architect, it should be considered for designation as a mini-historic district. HPC was told at the meeting it was not appropriate to include the other 3 houses at this time. Between 1880 and 1900, the University of Minnesota student enrollment rose from 308 to 3,236. Kenyon design houses in residential Dinkytown were developed for rental purposes. Lowry Hill was the preferred residence for the city's upper classes. It is highly unlikely that rental properties and rooming houses were being built there during the early 1900s. Properties being considered are representative of student and low-income rooming houses near Dinkytown. Rather than an abundance of these houses, many have been torn down. Those on the same block and to the east of 1103 4th Street Southeast are being systematically demolished to make way for new developments. Many that still exist are in woeful condition, and they were not designed by a master architect. Based on 8% at or below 60% of the median income, only 5.2 of the 65 new units will be affordable, and approximately 30 people would be displaced. We were told that the units would rent at around $1,250 to $1,350 per month. Currently, monthly rent for the rooming houses is $385 for each renter, and for the apartment house, $420 per bedroom. A few years ago, the Minnesota Student Association held a town hall on affordable student housing. Students just wanted a place to sleep and study. These 3 houses are part of a very early and old historic use in Dinkytown, in which rooming houses are part of the community. Using existing historic affordable housing near campus will displace people who need low-cost option. Support the HPC's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I note that Mr. Nelson is on the line. Mr. Nelson, are you part of the applicant team?
Hello, yes, I'm Scott Nelson. I'm part of the North Bay applicant team, and I'm really only available for questions. Did anyone have any questions about the conditions of the houses?
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for being on the call. Is there anyone else here to speak on this issue? Anyone?
Chair Goodman, there are no further speakers in queue.
Okay, seeing that there's no further speakers in queue at this time, I'm going to close the hearing. I will throw this open to members of the committee. Looks like Councilmember Fletcher would like to comment. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Goodman, and thank you to everybody for raising up these issues, for offering your testimony, and for digging in on this. I think in this case, the proposed action of the HPC will cause some delay. It does not necessarily save these buildings. I think they're calling for additional study to make sure that we have considered the historic value. I'll say I don't particularly feel like it's in my wheelhouse to assess whether it is or isn't historic. So I appreciate the HPC doing their job, and I appreciate them calling for a study. I think the basis for us to grant an appeal, given the consequences of not granting it, which is delay, doesn't seem to me to be sort of strong enough to merit, in this case, overturning the judgment of the Heritage Preservation Commission. So I'm going to move denial of the appeal.
On the motion to deny, are there other comments or questions by members of the committee? If you'd like to speak, either turn on your mic and video or sign in at the meeting chat. Is there anyone else on the committee who would like to speak to this issue?
I guess I'll just make a brief comment if I could. It was interesting this morning. I was talking to somebody about the West Bank and the future of Cedar Riverside and the West Bank. And we were looking at the history that's still present there. And we started talking about how other areas of the city have lost so much of their history. And Dinkytown was one of the examples that we brought up. So I really appreciate the motion and will support it. I think doing our due diligence with these kinds of things is something we should really try to do, and getting more information can only help. There's certainly been such dramatic transition in that area and other parts of the city. I think we're smart to be careful with what we're letting be destroyed. So I'll support this.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. I would just want to check, who is the attorney on this call? Our attorney.
Oh, Madam Chair, this is Joel Fussy with the City Attorney's Office.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that should Councilmember Fletcher's motion prevail, that we would not need to seek additional findings because those have been sought at the HPC level.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that is correct. It seems the reasoning that the council member is going with is to adopt the reasoning that the commission provided in their written findings.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fussy. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion to deny the appeal.
Councilmember Schrader?
Aye.
Wright?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye.
Fletcher?
Aye.
Ellison?
Aye.
Chair Goodman?
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
That item has been completed. Thank you for everyone for being on the call. We're just trying to figure out this remote meeting thing on our own, so I appreciate everyone being patient with the call-in number. We'll then move to our last item, which is discussion item, and it's number 7. It relates to Great Streets program changes, and I'd invite Rebecca to make her presentation, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Everyone can hear me, potentially maybe see me.
Yes.
Okay, great. There are 3 actions before you today in the report on Great Streets program changes, and I will go through each of them separately. The first being adopting updated categories for the Great Streets program eligible areas. And you'll see the map that was an attachment to the report on the screen shared. This map shows parcels within the city that were updated to correspond with the Minneapolis 2040 plan that was adopted by council in January of this year. And what this map does is adopt the categorization of those eligible areas. You may remember in the past we had 3 areas of eligibility. We categorized areas as intervene, monitor, and support. And this time we have narrowed the categorization from 3 to 2, and we have simply eligible and priority eligible areas. And what this also does is allow us to continue to prioritize areas of the city that are most in need of investment. The second action is adopting program updates for Great Streets Business District Support Grants. And that program, these grants fund the activities of our community-based organizations which organize, promote, and activate our business districts throughout the city and support small businesses throughout the city. This year's RFP, as noted in the report, will help to target activities that help business districts and small businesses respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, also helping our BIPOC businesses and supporting the work in the city's cultural districts. It also funds organizations in our community that we partner with that do geographically targeted and culturally competent assistance to businesses beyond just the small business program, our BTAP program. On final note on this piece, where you're adopting these program updates today will position us in CPED to release the request for proposals for the Great Streets Business District Support Grants for this year. But I'll note that awarding those grants will also require me or a colleague of mine to return to the City Council with a separate report for council action recommending those grants to be awarded at a later point in time this year. The third action is authorizing extensions to Business District Support Grant contracts from 2019 with 3 organizations, those being the Northeast Minneapolis Chamber, West Broadway Business and Area Coalition, and Seward Redesign. That extension will last through December 1st of this year and redirect unspent funds that those 3 organizations have to assist small businesses and artists during the economic repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic. Specific actions that will change for their activities in their contracts are listed in the report. That is all I have. If there are questions, I am happy to take those.
Are there any questions for staff on the presentation? Councilmember Schrader and I felt it made sense to have this presentation in light of everything going on because we're continuing to do business development related work, not because there was a concern, but there might be questions from members of the committee, and I'd invite you to speak now if you have a question. Seeing none, I'm going to move the staff recommendation on item number 7. I'd ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader. Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Chair Goodman.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
That item carries and is approved. Seeing no further business before us and without objection, I'll declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all for participating today.